seeing if you can pick up on the softball signals later. This is a really, really exciting session today. So thank you all for jumping in. Andrew is going to be moderating a conversation with our special guest, Ryan Bonner. We're going to be talking all about CMMC. So Ryan, welcome. Thank you for being here. We've also got Patrick from our Cynomi team online. He's going to share some perspective, do a demonstration for us today too, but we are answering all CMMC questions today. And we're going to spend most of our time on this conversation and not be very slide heavy today. So we want to make sure we kick off with some consistency. So just so you know what we're still going to expect, we'll cover our win of the week, our win back of the week. I have it on good authority. Our special guest, Ryan, might have something he wants to share in one of those two categories. So we'll see if he wants to celebrate his week with us. And then we'll get into the CMMC chat. So let's kick things off right. And how we always do it, let's start with some celebrations. Win of the week. Does anybody on the line want to share something that's worked for them over the last week, some success they've had, something they learned, or anything that you want to share with our community? And if not, I'll put our guest in the hot seat and make him go first. And everyone likes that when they're new on the community call.
Yeah, with this your new Nintendo, right? Isn't that what the
Is
win
that
is,
the win?
Ryan?
Yeah, yeah. I recently got my pre-ordered analog 3D. It's a modern Nintendo 64 with 4K. You still put the cartridge in and everything. You still got to wipe off the contacts, so you can play GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, whatever you want. It's pretty great. It's pretty nostalgic. I'm loving it.
That's what it is. I love that. Well, I'm going to open it up for a second, but I see Mike Fleeman as an attendee on here, and he promised me the next time he came on, he would do a win back for me. So,
I knew
Tim, if
you
you
were
can,
gonna call me out.
you knew it. You knew it.
Yeah,
So we'll move quick because we want to make sure we get to our conversation the most. So, Ryan, thank you for your win. I'm going to ask you, Mike, do you want to share your win back? And I know this is 2 weeks old, but pretend for me that it's not.
sure. Yeah, a few weeks ago we actually had a misstep with a client project, and luckily I caught it. We were missing some evidence from our assessment, and I think that if we had had Cynomi, we may have caught it sooner, just because you can attach everything to each control. And yeah, I know that the manual process makes us slow, and I cannot wait to get into Cynomi.
Mike, what type of assessment was it? Just out of curiosity.
It was a policy assessment and a vulnerability assessment too.
Okay, very cool.
No, Mike, when Mike was sharing with the community call earlier, I actually thought he was an existing partner because of how much he was talking about the program and the things that he liked about the platform. And so we got to know each other a couple weeks back. So thank you, Mike, for jumping on and sharing. I'll give
Sure.
it one last call and see if anyone has anything else they want to share, a win or a win back, before I pass it over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, sure thing. Tim, was the win back for you not having the White Castles if you could do it over?
No, because I would have either made the decision of White Castle or, I really got to get Kristen to the Waffle House because she's not had that either.
Oh, I could attest
So,
to that.
like
That's
the
cool.
win back is the traditional 2 a.m. Clients are like, I'm hungry. Everything's closed at the host hotel. So you pack everybody up in an Uber and you go to a Waffle House. Kristen's not had that, but when she does, we will report back on that. Not a fan of White Castle. Love the fries though.
Okay.
Good to know. She's going to listen to this call and be like, oh my God, Tim.
Oh,
Oh,
there may be
I
a
love it.
picture pop up. So
Oh, okay. Good to know. All right. Well, we focus this entire session around CMMC. Tim, this is your signal to start a poll. We're going to ask for your feedback in this poll. We've got a few questions in here, and we want to make sure we get your take so that we are focusing our conversations in the right areas. So
Yeah,
this is going to help.
and
Go ahead, Andrew.
independent, right? Aaron, like the reason we're doing this is for a few things. Like it's not going to say, "Oh, Aaron said this."
No,
Ryan,
not at all.
it's so as Ryan is chatting today to everybody, he's got a kind of a gauge on where everybody's at in their journey, and can tailor some of the content specifically and give kind of a continuum if he's talking about maybe packaging and pricing as an example, or your maturity. Rusty, you have a question?
Yeah, the poll says host and panelists cannot vote. So when you click on anything, it doesn't do anything.
We see that now. Yeah, I see that in the chat there. Yeah, we've got only allowing our attendees to vote for some reason, but it gives us a good barometer, so that's okay.
Got it. So everybody would
Sorry
promote
about that, Rusty.
Yeah, everybody would promote.
Yeah, just so we're clear, there's 41 attendees that can vote and 11 panelists. So at 41, we still should have a pretty good skew.
Pretty good representation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little worried because the first question is, do you manage CMMC engagements today? And for like the longest time, it was like up to like 11, and there wasn't even one. And then all of a sudden, I started popping in. I'm like,
yeah, I had the same
I'm like,
feeling
did we
too.
pick the wrong subject today or what?
No, you're right. They're gaining some steam here.
Good stuff. All right. Well, Aaron, I'm gonna while we keep the poll going and you let just take it down when you feel you have it enough. Let me thank Ryan for coming back. I think this is the trifecta, Ryan. So thank you for coming back, and I hopefully it'll be a lot more. And I think what's really cool is you got to meet the Cynomi team. You had to fly to Vegas to do that, but it was worthwhile, I hear. So for those that may not know you, welcome again back, and maybe share a little bit about your background. You've been doing this for a while, and I think what's cool is you have experience both in the MSP space as well as now building an organization that focuses specifically on the DIB, and a background working with certain NIST variants, and so I'd love for you to tell the story.
Sure.
And really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, so I come out of MSP background. I worked at an MSP from 2012 until 2019. Learned a lot as part of that process. And I think one of the big things I learned is that organizational change is hard. And, it's very hard to justify, reorienting your organization around opportunities like CMMC if the market is not awake yet and things like that. So I'm really excited for what it is like now compared to what it was like for me in 2016, 2017, 2018, when you're trying to get leadership excited about these new compliance requirements. And like, CMMC wasn't even out yet. There wasn't even a verification method yet. And so did a lot of work working with like the NIST manufacturing extension partnership programs and things like that to get, raise awareness, drive readiness, things of that nature directly with manufacturers themselves. And then decided to start Defcert in 2019, really just to do the compliance consulting aspect of it. So left the MSP that I was working at, started Defcert, and sort of the rest is history. Since then, we've worked with well over 100, probably over 150 different defense contractors at this point, doing a lot of different work, starting with what the heck is CUI all the way through to actually going through implementations. And of course, MSPs are a huge part of the overall cross section of the defense industrial base. I mean, when I was doing NIST MVP programs, your average defense contractor had 75 employees. And that's with huge organizations like RTX and Lockheed anchoring the other end of the spectrum. And so we're dealing with a lot of SMBs. SMBs use MSPs or MSSPs. And so there's just this massive total addressable market that we all have to try and wrap our arms around. So yeah, that's sort of what we're up to nowadays.
And just so the people out there can kind of gauge what Defcert does, Ryan, is a lot of your work, working alongside MSPs. Is it, they've got an engagement, but maybe are, just maybe getting down the road. They don't want to like, hey, I got a great opportunity here, Ryan. Can we partner on this? Can you kind of give us a sense of the scope of, so there's kind of Ryan's an ally, not necessarily somebody that's gonna I gotta potentially take my business. So also he kind of level set that.
Yeah, and like my first piece of like advice that I can try and impart is that like you want organizations like ours coming out of operational budgets, not IT budgets. And that involves in a lot of cases getting boardroom executive level buy-in. And so from that perspective, once that happens and that exists, like the IT spend is going to be dwarfed by some of the budgetary considerations that we often get involved in. So we don't want to compete for the same spend. We'll just put it that way. But I would say the biggest like buckets that I would build around who we're working with. We definitely work with lots of small businesses who have either a combination of in-house IT, MSPs, or co-managed environments. And then we deal with a lot of like larger organizations who are not a traditional fit for MSPs, all the way up into like very large enterprise. We're talking, tens of billions of dollars in, market valuations and market cap, things like that. What is interesting to us, and Patrick, you and I have talked about this, is that you have companies right now who are realizing all at once, like, oh my God, I can't use my global IT team to manage the compliant environment, whether it's an enclave, whether it's isolated into a business division, whatever. And all of a sudden, you have large enterprise who would never talk to an MSP, like saying things like, I need someone else to come in and manage all this. So it's really fascinating to see like opportunities opening up that we weren't even planning on in large enterprise. So don't be surprised if you find yourself talking to Fortune 100 companies who are like, yeah, get in here.
Interesting, Ron. Hey, so let's kick it off. And by the way, even though this is kind of a fireside chat with me and Ryan, I really hope you all chime in chat or raise your hands. Like this, I really want this to be collectively interactive, not just hey, Andrew and Ryan are having a conversation. And so Ryan, I want to start off with how you think CMMC is going to reshape the MSP landscape over the next few years, and where you feel the real business opportunities will emerge for providers who take it seriously.
Yeah, we talked about the total addressable market, right? You're going to have this outsized opportunity and first mover advantage for organizations, and I do strongly believe that in this 5-year period that we're entering into with the regulations going final, you're probably going to see MSPs who choose to focus exclusively on these kinds of customers. And then you're also going to have those customers coming from somewhere, right? So you're going to have MSPs hard quit on their 1 or 2 CMMC customers and divest those customers, and they're going to go somewhere. And this is just me taking all the battle scars from electronic medical records, modernization, and HIPAA security rule stuff in small medical practices back in the 2010s, and just projecting that onto the situation. You found more specialization happening in the MSP space because of that. And that didn't even really require you to like do as much organizational transformation as an MSP. You could still kind of just bolt that on. But it still led to specialization, and it still led to MSPs who would fly the flag of like, we do HIPAA and things like that. You're going to see more of that in this space, and even more at stake, I guess you could say. So I really do think we're headed towards like a crazy amount of the market realizing they need this all at the same time, which is just going to lead to like very abundant growth opportunities for people who go all in. And then later you're going to see retraction and consolidation where, customers are coming in from other incumbent MSPs and needing to make a jump.
Just out of curiosity, before I go on to the next question, Ryan, things went through finally through the OMB, it's official. Did that marker of time, that landmark thing that happened, did you see velocity post that event in engagements of, hey, we need to get going? Did you see contracts at the primes, really start to come down like, hey, now that this is in place, you shall start doing this? Like, was that marker that significant? Because there's been so much lead up to this. So I'm just curious, as somebody that's literally spends their waking hours in this day in and day out, what ramifications did that have?
Yeah, they're pretty significant, and they're just like building on each other like kind of a tsunami wave right now. So when the CMMC rule went final in November of last year, you started to see individual prime contractors, so like the customers of your customers, sending out form letters saying like it's time, like this matters now. We're going to start asking you more pointed questions about like give me an exact date on when you're going to be level 2 certified, or other things like that. And like the first customer that does that, might get a little bit of attention, but when the second, third, fourth customer starts sending out similar communications to one of your clients, it now all of a sudden it's a pattern, and they can't ignore it. So we're seeing organizations just out of nowhere just come in off the street. And you got to remember, like, we don't even advertise. Like, you have to look to find us, and we're still catching strays. Like people just coming in saying like I need help. So the overall market is starting to wake up and activate over this, and a lot of these people like are literally starting at ground zero. They haven't been like reading up on this, biding their time, learning. They're just like, boss says I need CMMC quantity 1, please sell it to me, and I need it in 3 months.
I'm confused because I thought everybody was doing this all along. This is just a verification now, Ryan.
Yeah, and as I'm sure we can all attest at some point in our professional lives, it isn't until somebody decides that they're going to check your math that some people get started. And for profit margin constrained industries like manufacturing, construction, like real core industries in the DIB, they're going to wait until the consequences are really clearly defined before they start resourcing these efforts. So yeah, lots of learning curves to overcome.
Bill, good to see you. What's going on, bud?
So, we've been struggling at Exceptional with the smaller DIB customers, that are like 20 people, maybe 25. And so I reached out to Patrick, and he gave us a leg up on developing a shared matrix for responsibility. And I thought that was eye-opening, and we've presented it to our clients. They still have a meltdown. What do you mean we have to have 320 controls? And we're saying, well, look at the shared responsibility matrix. We carry the burden of most of those controls. You just have policies like, who's coming in, the door, and tracking visitors, but we're still getting just massive pushback. And we haven't been able to get really much traction. And we have 5, DIB clients.
And so struggling, and just to clarify, I think you just said it, Bill, so Ryan can answer and we can all just kind of talk about this. Struggling is the struggle that they need level 2 as an example, and they're like, yeah, no thanks. I'm not gonna do that.
Well, that's how I don't think that's what they want. They just don't believe that we need the depth of these controls. And they look at the policies. We've even drafted the policies. We've got Cynomi. We try to make it easy, but they still feel like, well, what do you mean we've got 320 controls?
So just a quick question, Bill, and then I'll turn to Ryan. One, it's 2-3 questions, and then so one, have they received any notifications down for, coming down from their primes or subprimes or whatever? Number one. Number two, do they, have they calculated the contractual, obligations they have? I'm just curious, is it you trying to cajole them to do this, or has there been any, because people typically do things when money's on the line versus the MSP saying you need to prepare. So I'm just curious,
Well, you just turned on a light bulb above my head, which says I need to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Of them. Who's reaching out to you and saying you must be compliant? And so that's a good starting point with them, I think.
Yeah, one of the things, Aaron, and one of the things, and I think Patrick wants to say something, Aaron and I are going to talk about on the 19th is, we're going to kind of go through I guess, the last decade of sales, if you will. And when I say the last decade of sales research, right? And what's working, what's not working, how the buyer is changing. Um, and we live in an age today, and I'm going to give you a very high level. We live in an age today where most buyers don't go to a competitor, they don't do anything. We live in this era of indecision, and there's some really important things that we need to do as I'll call ourselves sellers, if you'll let me that for a minute, Bill. Um, and there's some very important things that we need to do. The days of moving people off the status quo, which is what we always wanted to do, like, oh my God, if you stay this way, this is what's at stake. Um, People more than ever don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be the ones that say, yeah, we spent two 250 grand with exceptional, and oh my God, I was the one that made that decision. So we're going to get into the psychology and where things sit in today's markets and buying psychology. But yeah, asking those questions is really critical. Patrick, did you have something, buddy? I saw you pop
Yeah,
up.
I mean, I completely agree with you. And as prior to joining Cynomi, I was a seller for a company that was selling managed services for CMMC level two to the DIB. And those were questions that I would always press on because it's a way to create urgency. I think a lot of the folks I was speaking with, or the client of exceptionals that Bill and I were talking about yesterday, they don't necessarily understand what's required of them. Even if this company has already had 7012 in contracts for years, they have an ITAR seal on their website. It's like there's certain things that you're doing and not doing today that could spell trouble for you in the future. And being able to get an understanding of who are your customers. Are you working with Boeing? Are you a part of the you know F-16 supply chain, or whatever the case may be, and then trying to figure out what is the cost of inaction or not doing something. What if we push this off for the next 12 months because or 6 months? And like we talked about on the prep call, and I think Bill, we talked about this yesterday. Third party assessors are booked out for 6+ months in some cases to even get your assessment scheduled. That's assuming that you're ready to go sit through that process. So if you have somebody telling you that, or asking what is the date that you're expecting to be certified, if you're having to still implement what's required on your contractual obligations and then wait 6 months to actually sit for an assessment, like, I mean, a talk track I would use all the time. It's like, we're already looking at 2027 at this point for you guys to sit for a certification.
Yeah.
So, like, are we going to start tackling this problem together now, or are we going to wait and potentially lose out on, more revenue coming through the door? So, yeah, agree 100%.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Patrick. And I think that's another, arrow in the quiver for me to speak with our clients and make sure they know that there is limited resources on third-party assessors. And if we don't get started now, good luck.
Patrick, that was really good. The last thing I'll say, Bill, on this question, and Aaron, okay that we're kind of riffing here. I know we had this fireside. Is it okay to riff away on this? Okay.
100%. We want this to be absolutely.
Okay. So Bill, the other thing that's really important in today's markets that's really changed over the last probably, post-pandemic really drastically is the amount of people involved in a buying decision, right? So as an example, just quick question. The person you're talking about, these 300 plus controls, give me the role of that person, give or take what their role is.
CEO.
What's their role? CEO. Okay, perfect. Is there a CRO in that company?
No.
Okay. The CEO handles the sales.
Yep.
Okay. And does the CEO handle the contractual obligations of the company, or is there a legal person?
Nope. It's the CEO.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like, this person is judge, jury, et cetera, et cetera. So that's important to know. It's just also what I would ask him is are there, when you sign the contracts, with this $3 million deal, was there third party legal involved as an
Mm.
example? Were there CFOs? Were there other people involved in the process? Like, so kind of maybe, frame out like who's on your team when you guys landed that deal? Was it just you? The reason that's important is to what Patrick's saying is, hey, you landed this awesome deal, right? A lot of times, at least in small to medium businesses, the faster we can sign that DocuSign for that $3 million, the better. But I would be hard pressed that there wasn't some third, if he doesn't have in-house legal for a small company, which I doubt, there's some legal entity, right? And, say, hey, look, maybe we could look at the contractual obligations you have, like coming due and what you've signed up for here. Like, I want to make sure that, let's just say this contract renews and such a date, or there's a clause that says if you're not compliant with this subprime, as an example, we have the rights to do X, Y, and Z. And then you can start to map out that time frame that Patrick talked about. Like, hey, this isn't me. I'm not trying to push you to do 350 controls. There's $3 million on the line. There's this contractual language in here that says this, and this. You know, let's work on this together. I'm not on the same side of this as you.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bill, depending on where your clients are in the supply chain, they have different revenue cycles. So if they are receiving direct awards, let's say from an agency or from like one of the higher up primes, they might be performing over 6 months or 2 years on a single contract award worth a lot of money. If they are a build to print manufacturer way down in the supply chain, they're living on a purchase order by purchase order basis, which means they're doing a super high quantity of transactions, right, in order to get their money. They could be doing something for a few $1,000 or a few $100,000, not $20 million, right? And so I found it's helpful to frame for organizations working on bigger contracts that have a lot more of a dollar value assigned that are going to execute over time, really, really focusing on when is your next big award coming up and how soon would you find out that there's a CMMC requirement? At what moment in time would you learn? And they're only going to have, from the time they learn that CMMC is going to be required to the time of award, which could be 70 days, in order to know whether they're even going to be able to bid. And so those are some of the timelines that you would want to know, like how early in advance do you learn that you're going to have a requirement in this contract? These are called DFARS provisions, but it's what's in writing on the solicitation. If they live life that way, do it that way. How much of an early warning system would you have, and when's the next big fat award that's going to make or break your business coming up? And work backwards from that date. Now, if they're one of these build to print manufacturers that are just turning and burning POs all day, they have to measure loss at a customer level. Doesn't matter PO by PO. If Lockheed Martin drops me, I lose all the POs from Lockheed Martin, right? So I want to roll up to that dollar amount and that customer relationship level. And I would want to go through and say, of the 6 customers that represent the bulk of your business, how many have sent you that strongly worded form letter? Because those are all the relationships that are at risk. So annually for this year, how much would you financialize to protect the revenue from the people who have already sent you that strongly worded letter? And then work backwards from there. So it's, for some people, it's a timeline discussion. For some people, it's a budgeting discussion. But I wouldn't be afraid to ask for 1% of the revenue at risk to make this right. Give them something they can sink their teeth into. Or I need 10 hours a week of your team's time until we get most of this done. Make them make a resource commitment. make them task someone with working with you on this and co-managing the outcomes and not just being a consumer.
Well, I know I stepped on the program, but this is very valuable, knowledge that you guys are sharing. It's you can't pay for that. And so I appreciate the input and help and guidance.
And just
Thanks,
a
guys.
quick shout to, I mean, this is something that Tim Coach brings up all the time. He brought it up in one of our sessions at Write a Boom and on a webinar we did last week. But like one of the foundational components to engaging with your clients is understanding how they make money. Right? Asking questions about, tell me about the contracts that you work on. Who are your customers? How are you communicating with them, or how are they communicating with you? What are the processes that are involved internally that are going to translate to dollars for you? Not to say that those are things that you can kind of go back to and leverage in future conversations, but being able to tie risk to revenue is extremely important, regardless of the compliance requirements that we're dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. So Ryan, the poll suggests that about 42% manage CMMC engagements today. But let's just say I'm one of these, I'm on this call and I'm thinking about getting into the CMMC market. Sorry, I'm an MSP looking to get into the CMMC market. What do you feel the structural differences are between the ones that succeed and the ones that are going to struggle?
Yeah, we think about like some of the indicators that we've seen when working with MSPs. We call these indicators of success, right? MSPs that have more than one person involved in the CMMC effort thrive and are way more effective in this space. And there's a couple of reasons for that, right? The first is that if you invest all of your CMMC knowledge in one person, that person's already gone. I hate to say it, but they are probably going to be able to get a different role somewhere else because of what they've learned. So we always advocate for having like someone with ownership stake in the business be at least one of the people in the company to have a CCP, which is the CMMC certified professional training, so that you've got some roster depth there. But then also, if you have more than one person involved, it probably means you have found a way to delegate work. And the way that you make a CMMC practice profitable is by turning high-level engineering grade tier 3 work into repeatable processes and steps. So whether that's getting that down to a tier 1 ticket level or getting it to an analyst or getting it to somebody else, it's proving that you can do knowledge transfer and that you can have repeatable process around some of the things you have to do. So just simply having more than one person involved has been like a crazy indicator for us. And then, from there, if you are able to really have like an evidence-based approach to how you go through this with clients, it's kind of like picture or it didn't happen, right? I need receipts for everything. If we have this conditional access policy in place, I'm going to go get a screenshot of the grant controls for that policy, and I'm going to write one sentence and I'm going to validate it. And that's how we're going to ship evidence off to a C3PAO. And so organizations who are like high theory, we have all these tools, we have an offering, then you're like, how do you meet this requirement of the 320 objectives? And they're like, I'll get back with you. Like that's not a good sign. Like you want to know exactly how this cookie crumbles, because then that is a massive indicator that you can scale the offering, right? If I have at least one potential correct answer for everything that I'm going to say I'm responsible for in an SRM, it's probably the right answer for 75% of my customer base.
Good stuff. And shout out on the CCP to Michael Warland, who's prepping for the exam right now. So I'm glad you mentioned that cert as well. Oh, Brian Blakely's in the house. That's really cool. Hey, Brian. All right. So, when you look at the current CMMC conversations, right, broadly, what do you feel is overhyped and what do you feel MSPs are seriously underestimating?
I think a lot of times what's being overhyped is like assessments and readiness, like call us today. Um, and the reason that I say that is because a lot of MSPs have come up with some sort of questions they can ask or things of that nature. And strangely, I don't see them directly correlating like a gap they identify to a specific line item offering that they would quote and sell. It's crazy, but like it's like these are stovepiped skill sets and people are not connecting the dots. Like if you cannot immediately follow up with gap discovered equals this part of our service, then like what are we doing? It's like fake productivity. So that's a part that we're really seeing overhyped. And then just like MSPs, right? We tend to always favor tools over process. You know what I mean? And so like overhyping the new tool set, the new shiny toy that we bought, and not really operationalizing it yet is going to lead to like a lot of like features that never got toggled on in the first place. So it's almost, I'm very careful to use this word outside of an MSP discussion, but it's kind of a false claim if you know what that means in this space. So like don't write checks you can't cash on a capability perspective. Where people are really underestimating, I think, is like going back to the evidence-based approach. What is it going to take to do that? And then like how structured do we want all of our processes to be where we can unblock our clients? In a traditional MSP relationship, there are going to be some customers who want to tell you how to do your job, and that has to be completely flipped. So it is really appreciated by clients when you can come in and say, listen, we don't have a lot of time. Here are the 6 security groups that we are going to create in your environment. Here's what they're named. Here's what they do. Shut up and sign. I sent you the DocuSign. I sent you the whatever. We need to move fast. And people love it when you take decisions away in these situations where they know they've got to comply in a short period of time. So like that is being, I think, undervalued, is the ability to come in and say, I'm Henry Ford. You can have it in any color as long as it's black. It's going to be these things, and just moving fast and getting there faster and standardizing. It's like a fantastic leverage tool to standardize the offering, but we're seeing a lot of MSPs who still move at the pace that their customers can have conversations instead of coming in with a proposed set of actions and saying, I want to do this. Can you just say yes?
Ryan, the recommendation of, what you just did was a few things from the research out there, one being from the Jolt effect, from Matthew Dixon, talks a lot about, you have to limit the number of options you give customers, especially, when you give customers that are in a world of indecision, more choices, you will definitely freeze them. So hey, I'm the expert at this. I know what's good. I'm advocating. When they know you're their advocate, this is what you need to do. And, if you do this in a timely manner and work together, this is the results we're going to get. So that was really good. I'm going to ask a quick question from Brian Blakely. He mentioned he's straddling something, so he couldn't bring it too close. But he said, how important is it for an MSP to choose an RPO versus non-RPO to help support their clients' CMMC level 2 readiness? In your opinion, does it improve CMMC level 2 readiness journey to have an experienced CCA and CCPs on the readiness team?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with those acronyms, an RPO is a registered provider organization. That's basically a company like a consulting firm or even an MSP who basically is registered in the cyber AV marketplace. The training burden, the cost of entry, the barrier to entry is pretty low for that. Like you pay money to have an RPO status, but what I would value a lot higher is whether that RPO has a CMMC certified professional, a CCP, or an assessor, a CCA on staff. Because that's the exam you actually have to sit for, which is now accredited by the cyber AV, but then also is now being managed by Osaka, who just took over. So if you know who Osaka is, if you've ever done any of your core like CISM, CISP certifications, things like that, So like it's an actual exam you have to study and sit for. I put way more credence in that than whether the company someone works for is an RPO, because that's more of like a virtue signaling tool and a way to get listed. So from that perspective, CCPs and CCAs are a way better indicator that someone's making the investment and has the knowledge. At the end of the day, you really want to ask questions that drive to the core of like, who have you gotten certified? Do you have references? Can I talk to them? Are they in the same industry as my client? Like, if those things aren't true, then there's a lot of RPOs out there who, haven't really been through many of these processes. And so you want to make sure that they know how to survive a C3PAO assessment. Have they found ways to really get the job done? The first CMMC assessment we went through under the Joint Surveillance Program was very resource intensive for our team. The last one we went through 2 weeks ago, we basically just had someone on the call. The evidence spoke for itself. The whole thing was over in a day. Like you don't get there without getting your reps in. So like, and this MSPs can pull off this same party trick, right? You do not want your brightest and best in every assessment. You need to get to an evidence-based approach where the C3PO rolls in and it will just be like, I really only got 3 questions. 2 of them can be answered by the MSP. Let's knock this out. Chop, chop.
So Ryan, so when an MSP gets it right, what does the revenue model look like? And what kind of, MRR opportunities are at hand?
Well, I mean, I would definitely say that the seat count goes up. I would also take a look at the fact that in many cases, your clients are not trying to enroll their whole business in these security controls. So you're probably building a smaller environment with fewer users. So don't hamstring yourself by just per seat pricing. I would have a funded bucket. When I was answering questions like this 2 years ago, I was saying things like, you got to charge at least $7,500 a month for this to be real for your customer. They will actually put more resources behind it the more you charge, because they want their money back. They want their ROI. And so I would even package it as like, it's this much money and this many hours commitment from your team, not necessarily in a live call with us, but like, I need you to pull someone away from their desk and say, this is you 2 days a week until this is gone, and actually put people around it. That was 2 years ago. Now with inflation and all these other things happening, cost of goods sold going up, I would say 7,500 could not maybe be enough. And then with other things like, better tooling or like AI or things like that can help cut down on like the really banal, repetitive parts of some of the jobs that like a client or an MSP might do. Maybe the human commitment could go down a little bit, but these are some of the parameters that I would put around what the revenue opportunity could look like. I'm talking to, and Patrick, this from a past life, right? I'll talk to MSPs in the DIB space and like, they're casually like, yeah, I mean, it's only a $2 million opportunity, like, like the amount of revenue that can be tied to these is a lot more substantial.
Yeah, we had one before I left. I mean, to one of your earlier points, large, Fortune 500 company looking for help. I think it was a 55, 60K MRR opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The average was probably closer to 10, 15, but there's a range for sure.
So got about 3 minutes before we're going to bring on Patrick and talk a little bit about how, it's going to kind of show how Cynomi's hitting the mark on this for CMMC. But Ryan, one question I always have to ask is packaging and pricing.
Mm-hmm.
What pitfalls, where can people get this wrong?
Yeah, well, the first thing is assuming that a bunch of this is going to be included in your existing services. Do not make that mistake. It doesn't even matter if it sounds like an activity that you go through today. The level at which you're going to need to document these activities is going to go up. And you need to set expectations with the client that like, yes, we do security inside of our normal offering today. This is government compliance. The rules change. We have to do weird things that we would not do for any normal company in order to meet these regulatory requirements. Blame the regulations at any opportunity you can find. You're not here to become buddies with the government on this. Like, I think that organizations who do the virtue signaling and like waving the big flag and like, we're doing this for America, like that's cool. But you're also like putting yourself on the wrong side of the table. You need to be on the other side of the table, looking across the table at this problem with your client, saying like, how are we going to meet these federal requirements that are a blunt instrument that weren't written for us? They were written for agencies, and you need to take that to task. So don't pretend that the government is your buddy on this. Don't act like this is all going to be included in your normal services. Say this blows up everything we would normally do. We do things cost effectively. Now we have to do things in a way that meets regulatory requirements. The pricing is going to be different. So yeah, don't fall into a trap of like, we'll just fold it in. We'll just cover the spread. Like that is what will get you to quit on CMMC. So from that perspective, packaging and pricing is important. And I would also say that like the biggest trap that I see MSPs getting into is that the cost of CMMC are somehow factored on their current MRR with the client. And it just won't work that way. Like your client's going to want CMMC to be 20% of what they spend with you now. This needs to be a totally different thing. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of MSPs and MSSPs literally start a new LLC so that all sins are forgiven and the rate is the rate is the rate.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Patrick, that was fantastic, Ryan. I'm going to hand it to Patrick and take it over from here. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Ryan, I mean, you have to draw a line in the sand as well, right? Like in your statements of work, this is how much time you are paying for on a monthly basis. And if we're exceeding that for whatever reason, this is how much those additional hours are going to cost. It's at least the model that we operated on my previous life. But no, appreciate everybody having me, and I know that I have some partners in here, so thanks for joining the call. Got to get permissions to share my screen here. Okay, wrong one. Hold on.
I got you, man. I made you a pop chip. Should be good to go.
All right, can we see Cynomi? All right, perfect. Well, this will be pretty straightforward. If anybody has questions, let me know, throw them in the chat. Happy to, dive a little bit deeper. Or if you're a current partner and you work with me, always happy to have these conversations. If you don't work with me, talk to your partner account manager or your point of contact, and we can help you out with any specific questions. But I always like starting here at the service provider level where we can see all of our clients, because I think, one differentiator for us from, at least my perspective, is that most of the partners we work with, your traditional MSP, isn't just laser focused on CMMC and servicing the DIB. Yes, there are some of those more specialized providers out there, but most of the folks on the call, I'd have to imagine, have folks with maybe a little CMMC, CGIS, HIPAA, SEC. It's kind of all over the board. So being able to manage this at scale in a multi-tenant environment, create those processes for your team to be able to have the repeatable conversations regardless of the framework or compliance requirement, I think is extremely important. I'm going to jump into my pretend DIB client here, Ironclad Defense, and we're always logging in and seeing our general Cynomi dashboard, which is giving us some great high level information, which I think is important for a client to be able to see at some points, kind of their percentage completion against a specific framework. But in most cases, when we're talking about CMMC level 1 or level 2, we're definitely living in the compliance module. Between bouncing back and forth between tasks and compliance. So a few things I wanted to call out here because we did make some changes recently. Some of you may have seen these, some may have not seen them, but we added a couple specific reports for CMMC level 2 that were actually created with the feedback of some of our partners who are CCAs. They've sat through assessments, and it's kind of like, hey, how can we help Cynomi just turn the volume up a little bit on CMMC level 2 to make this even more impactful for your partners that are supporting clients in the DIB. So just want to cover a few of those quickly. One is the kind of live view of the SPRS score for the client. So most of the folks that you're engaging with, I hope, understand what the SPRS score is, and hopefully they're not just, or historically submitting a perfect 110 when somebody's asking them to do so. This gives them a live look dynamically at, hey, based on the tasks that we have closed, based on the controls that we're meeting, what does our SPRS score look like? If we had to enter this right now or talk to one of our clients or a prime to say we're at an 8, there's some work that we need to do. How do we prioritize this, and what does the timeline look like? This is also available in a report, but I think for anybody who's kind of working through this with a client, like, this is where I would start, is kind of like, here's how our percentage completion to the framework actually maps to the your SPRS score here. Largely, again, what we're talking through with folks is the implementation of 800.171a as the CMMC level 2 framework is based on here in Cynomi. So this is the 320 assessment objectives, not the 110 controls. And I think this is primarily where partners are living and working through these lists of tasks to help translate how the sausage is made, or the ingredients that go into the cake, being able to get all of that stuff done in a platform like Cynomi, and then translate that to your SSP, the story that you're telling to the assessor. And I think to Ryan's earlier point, you want to get it to the point where this is a repeatable process for you. I typically urge partners I work with to go through your own CMMC level 2 assessment if you're serious about supporting clients who are going to be subject to level 2, so you can get an understanding of what's required for you going through the assessment and how that's going to translate to your clients. Because a lot of this from a managed services standpoint does come back to shared responsibility. So I literally had a conversation with a prospective partner right before this call, and we talked about doing this at scale. How do MSPs help clients achieve level 2 at scale? And I think you do have to be prescriptive in the sense that you have the box that you operate within. And to Ryan's point, Andrew's point, being able to potentially turn business away if they don't fit your mold, if you're going to burn time and not have a profitable contract with some of these clients that are trying to dictate, no, this is how we do things. You do need to flip the script and say, no, this is our process, how we're meeting these requirements that you're going to inherit from us, because this effectively becomes your, part of your SRM. Like if you can figure out, hey, this is what we're owning from a technical implementation standpoint, these are the controls that are being inherited by the client, we can know on a recurring basis that all we need for authorized access control is a list of the authorized users from this client. We can have a conversation with them. These are the questions that the resource who's working with them is going to ask. This is where they can go to get that. But we know that this is how we manage it at a service provider level. So being able to track this in Cynomi and almost templatize this for your MSP to get a portion of that work done is going to be extremely important at scale. And one of the kind of extra reports we have to help with that, to kind of help with translating this to your SSP, but also creating a shared responsibilities model is this output here. Can you see the CSV, or am I just sharing Safari?
Let's see.
You're just sharing the Safari right now.
Okay.
You can see like the drop down of the CSVs, but not the actual report.
There it is. You got it now.
So this is the output of the report, and I know we're running out of time. Could spend more time on this, on another call. But again, this is what it would look like, right? We're getting the export from Cynomi, the description of how the control was implemented, but then also being able to document who's owning this process. Is this something that we're owning as the service provider? What information do we need from our client? Is this something that's going to be solely their responsibility? And again, if you go through this yourself, from the perspective of this is our environment that we're using to manage these clients, and then these are the 20%, 25%, 30% of the objectives that are going to require some level of action information from the client. I have some partners kind of using this to guide what their shared responsibilities matrix actually looks like with their client. So again, I think that does a couple things just in terms of creating a repeatable process. You can put somebody in the seat who, absolutely is a CCA and, is comfortable having these conversations, but give them the guardrails to operate within. Like, this is how the organization I came from went from one compliance advisor to 7 different resources that were working with clients on a, daily and weekly basis. It was process and systems that we had in place.
Awesome. Erin, any closing comments? I know we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, we're there. Just a big thank you. Thank you to you, Andrew, to Ryan, to Patrick for driving this conversation. Really appreciate it. We will be back next week. We have a special guest talking about AI corporate governance, talking AI discovery and usage and control at the board level. And that'll be Bob Zukas joining us next week. So look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you all.
And Brian, I hope you don't mind. I threw your LinkedIn in the chat, so anybody that wants to connect with you, and take those crazy conversations off into somebody else's world, it's all you, buddy.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.